Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figure It Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and welcome to PlayLoad. This is all my video game pickups for the month of May 2024. And as you can see, we got a whole bunch of cool stuff here. We got a bunch of European exclusives because I was in the UK for a while, and we also have some packages that we're going to start the video off with. Before we do that, though, if you guys could do me a favor, please like this video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before, as well as check out my social media stuff in the description. I've got Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, and my travel channel. And for those wondering what happened to the other microphone, I've kind of made the decision that in any video where I'm kind of like, I have stuff in front of me, I'm going to go use this old setup. And anytime we're just doing a discussion video where there's really nothing in front of me, we're just kind of chatting, then I'll use the newer mic, just so I think that will work out. But yes, package time. Now, I did mention my travel channel, and I'm pretty sure this package actually comes because of that channel, more so than this one, but it also is relevant to this channel. A company reached out to me called MoveSpeed, and they basically said, like, hey, you might need more additional storage for your phone, or just additional storage in general. Also works for games as well. And so they're like, we have this new type of SSD, this portable SSD, we thought might be of some use to you. So huge shout out to them. I'll put a link in the description to them, but let's go ahead and take a look at it real quick. But ultimately, it is this, the MoveSpeed portable solid state drive, 512 gigabyte. I thought it was the, let's see, MoveSpeed, yeah, let's see here. I thought it was a 1 terabyte model, but I guess I'm misremembering. But we'll go ahead and open it up. And it should just be basically, you know, just a portable SSD. Yeah, so it's got this tiny little part here and a cable. So this, I believe, this tiny little thing is actually the hard drive, and it looks like an enter key. And we also have a USB-C cable. Now, the purpose of this, as I mentioned before, I talked about my travel channel, right? So the idea was that basically they were saying, like, you know, if you have a lot of footage on your phone, which I do, this would actually be pretty useful because basically you can just kind of mount, because I use a Google Pixel specifically. So what you can do is you can take this, you can mount it to this device and then mount it to the phone, link it up, and your phone will treat it as external storage. Now, the reason that's super useful to me is because when I'm making travel videos, of which there will be multiples about the UK, or if I do anything else, I can actually take this and just kind of plug it in and transfer everything to there, so I'm not really dependent upon my phone for archiving. Frankly, it's much smarter to use an SSD. But as far as gaming purposes, I mean, it literally looks like an enter key. So this obviously will work on a PC. It'll work on something like, you know, an Xbox One or an Xbox Series S, X, a PS4, PS5, whatever. And in those cases, if you were going to use it for a game console, you could also basically just, you know, format it and use it for external storage devices and gameplay off of that. In fact, the fun thing about things like the Xbox One in particular is they used a mechanical internal drive that you really can't change short of having special skills. So, but the read speed off of the USB port is actually faster than on the internal drive. Basically what I'm saying is if you use this is a fun fact about that system, if you use an external SSD and put your games on that, they will actually play faster off of that than they will on the internal drive. That doesn't apply to the Series S and X because they actually use SSDs, but they can use this for additional storage. So that's very cool. So I will tinker with it for a bit. But yeah, ultimately, this is just really just, I want to give a huge shout out to MoveSpeed for sending this my way. This is going to make my travel channel life a lot easier because as you can see, it's small, it's compact, and once I plug it into my phone, I can just kind of carry it around and, you know, just transfer footage to it. And then of course, when I need it back here, I can just throw it on the PC very easily rather than having to deal with, honestly, getting footage off of the phone with that much data on it, that many photos and everything, is just a pain. So this is just going to make my life a lot easier. So huge shout out to them. Thank you so much for doing that. Yeah, awesome. If you guys want to check this out, I will put a link in the description so you can pick one up yourselves if you're interested. It also came with some sort of 3M like plastic mount of some kind. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that is. It has instructions, although I don't think it really is going to, there's going to be much to it. I guess you just plug it in and format it. That would be my anticipation. Obviously, it also claims, of course, that it uses, it functions with a laptop, which makes perfect sense. It uses a USB-C to C port. However, I'm sure you could swap it out for a USB-C to A cable if you wanted to. But yeah, very, very cool. So yeah, huge shout out to MoveSpeed. Thank you again very much, and I look forward to using this. Thank you for making my travel channel life a little bit easier. Moving on, we got a couple other packages here. This one comes from Rocker Gaming. Now, Rocker Gaming is a fellow YouTuber. I've actually done a video with him. Super nice guy. He actually lives somewhat near me. We both live in Chicago. And he decided to work on a new project, and he decided to send one to me. Now, what I decided I'm going to do is just kind of show you this basically. I intend to do a video on this later. So this is just kind of a tease for that. So we open this up here, and inside we have documentation from him. This is just kind of basic instructions on the device, including installation instructions, the device itself, and some 3D printed stuff. Basically, this is a device I believe that that Rocker Gaming himself designed. He's a very smart guy, and we'll take a look at it. And it's for your NES. It essentially is, if you guys, anybody out there remembers the blinking light Win, this is an updated version that he created called the Ninten-Drawer. And just by looking at it, you can tell the purpose of it. If you have an NES, the 72-pin flawed design, you can remove that and replace it with this, and that gives you a clean insertion method that actually is reliable and consistent. At least that's the idea. So yeah, he was cool enough to send me a review unit, so I will, obviously later, I will actually install this, tinker with it, we'll do a whole video, it'll be a whole big thing. It also included a little replacement lid of sorts there, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I will install that all later when I make a video. So stay tuned to that. That will be a thing. So huge shout out to Rocker Gaming. And we have another one. This comes from Senko Games. These were the same guys that not long ago also sent me the Easy Flash for the Nintendo DS. And they said like, hey, we have this other thing, we're just gonna go ahead and send it to you. And I was like, okie dokie. I don't really know much about this one, so I intend to do a video on it too, because it seems like it would be interesting, but I don't know, like I said, I don't know a whole lot about it. This is the Cube ODE. All I really know about this is that it's very similar in concept to the GC Loader, which was a device, an ODE, replaced the disk drive in a GameCube with this, and then it uses SD cards, and effectively you put like, you know, Swiss, a boot ISO on there, and then from there it has a menu, and then it can play games off of an SD card. Effectively just replacing the disk drive with a board that allows you to play games off of an SD card. So yeah, this one's, I don't know exactly who made this, all I know is Senko Games sent it to me, but yeah, we will at some point take a more in-depth look at this. But yeah, so stay tuned to that. Again, I'll put a link in the description there. So there will be links to all three of these guys and their things, and like I said, we'll do separate videos on those later. But now, let us move on to European pickups. Like I said, I was out in the UK, and I will be doing some travel videos on that, and you guys can see that whole adventure, but we did manage to score some pickups, most of which came from one store, but this first pile was kind of a hodgepodge of places. This first game, I actually did not pick up for myself. If you saw the previous episode of PlayLoad, you'll know that a buddy of mine named Sunshine was cool enough to repair and send me a DS Lite, which was very nice of him to do. And while I was over there, I was taking photos in some store, and on my Discord, he noticed, he's like, hey, I want that game. And so I found it. It was a cheap PS2 game. And so I picked it up for him, and he was like, oh, I'll pay you back. I'm like, nah, keep your money. I'll trade you basically for the DS. It was nice of you to do. So this isn't mine. I just thought I'd show you a European exclusive game. This is Global Defense Force for the PlayStation 2. Now, to be fair, I'm pretty sure this game actually did come out in Japan for the PlayStation 2. It just didn't come out in North America. But yeah, it's not mine. I just wanted to show you guys an example of a PlayStation 2 game that we didn't get. There is a ton of PlayStation 2 exclusive content in Europe. But speaking of, I guess I should explain this in case it isn't obvious. Personally, if I'm buying games in Europe, I typically only get games that we never got, or are unique or cheap or something like that for some special reason. But in the most parts, the only games I would bother picking up are ones that I wouldn't normally have access to in the North American market, which completely explains the next one. This was actually my first pickup of the entire trip. I was there for a couple of weeks, and like for the first whole week, I found nothing at all. And I was like, well, this sucks. And then eventually I found this thing, and I was like, well, I don't want to walk away empty-handed, because it was possible I was going to get back to the States and have not picked up a single game. So I got this. In hindsight, though, I probably wouldn't have bothered. World Snooker Championship 2007 for the Xbox 360. What is this? Basically, it's like billiards or pool. This is definitely a European exclusive. This franchise, if you will, did not come out in North America. And the only reason I cared about it beyond the fact that it was an exclusive title is that actually Sega made it, which I just thought was kind of neat. And it was only like £1, which is like, $1.20. So I was like, all right, whatever. I'll get something. But yeah, that's why I got that. Then I started getting lucky. I actually picked up some GameCube games. That was pleasantly surprising because, so the GameCube, I love that system. My collector's goal for it is to get every game for it that was not released on the original Xbox, which significantly narrows down the size of that library. The Japanese stuff I've mostly finished. The North American stuff, I still got a long ways to go if I ever even finish it. But the European stuff is odd because it's very short. There was only like 10 European exclusive releases. However, finding them is a huge pain. And if you've been watching this series over years, you'll know that I occasionally got lucky and chipped away at it. This time I got really lucky. I found 2 of them. 2 out of like the 10. And what made the situation even better is I had looked at the list once I picked up the first one, and I was like, oh, sweet, so there's only 4, including that one. So now I'm down to 3. And then upon reevaluating the list, I was like, wait a minute, one of these, which I believe is called Mercedes World Tour Racing or something like that, was actually released in North America on the Xbox as just World Racing. And so I was like, oh, sweet, don't have to care about that one. So I effectively crossed it off. And then I found another one. So of the 4 I needed, I effectively only have 1 remaining. I only need 1 more European exclusive GameCube game to be done with that subset. What is it? Well, I'm going to keep that a secret for now in case I ever actually find it. So one day. But in the meantime, what are the 2 games I got? First up, Asterix and Obelix XXL. Now, this is a franchise that if you live in any part of mainland Europe, you are very likely to be very familiar with. These characters are incredibly popular, particularly in the Scandinavian countries and France, as Germany as well, maybe the Low Country, and maybe the entire Benelux area as well. Not as much in the UK, although the content is released there, but I just don't, in my experience as a tourist, mind you, I'd never lived in the UK, of course. In my experience there, it's always been like, oh yeah, that's a thing, but it's not as big as a deal as it is in mainland Europe. In the United States, this franchise effectively doesn't exist. I think we've only ever had a handful of releases of anything to do with it, ever. The only part of North America that seems to kind of embrace this is Quebec, French Canada. Which explains one of the most bizarre Xbox 360 releases ever. There was an Asterisk and Obelix Olympics game that only came out in Canada in North America because of Quebec. But this game apparently didn't justify that. There was no North American release of this game, even in Canada. Yeah, there was a mainland European release of this. There's actually 2 versions of this, from what I can tell. I have what I would say is the better of the 2, and you can tell the difference on the back of the game. The back, if you have the UK version of this, there's actually 4 languages on the back, which is English and has the Union Jack to represent it. It also has the German flag, Spanish flag, and Italian flag, so you can play it in multiple languages. It also says Game In, and it has a bunch of additional languages listed. However, there is a mainland European version of this where the English section is not there. Now, whether or not the game itself plays in English anyway, I don't know. But at least from a package perspective, I know this is the version that came out in the UK. It even says Atari UK and was distributed to be a part of London. Like, it says it. So I was happy to get that one because it's the less common of the 2. And yeah, very nice to have that. And so that was an official release. Now we get on to what is a very bizarre GameCube release, and I'm about to accidentally make this game more expensive without wanting to, so here we go. When I looked at that list of European GameCube exclusives, it had dawned on me that I didn't actually know what all of them looked like, in particular one of them, because I was like, man, I don't think I've ever seen this game ever, or even heard of it, but it's always on this list. What is this? So I decided to look it up. And then I found it, which was even more shocking, so I went ahead and bought it. This is Max Play Volume 1. Looks bizarre, right? This looks like, well, they didn't have the original artwork, so some retro game store just printed off their own cover. No, this is how it was released. This is an unofficial release made by Datel or Datel. I'm not sure how they pronounce their name. They're the guys who made Action Replay, which was a cheat code disc. This is a game release that they did. Now, this one is bizarre for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's called Max Play Volume 1 Classic Games. What it actually is a pirated version of a Game Boy Advance emulator for the GameCube, effectively using like the boot disc of the GameCube for the Game Boy player, somewhat hacking that and giving you 10 specific Game Boy Advance games, all of which are just like junk that you've probably never heard of. Jetpack 2, Paddle Panic, Super Power Shot, Invaders, Chopper 2 The Return, Loop the Loop, Pop'em, Dragon Tiles 3, Bounty Hunter X, and Proxima. And more interestingly, because I became fascinated by this release, I looked into it a little bit, and apparently within the code of the game, although it's not accessible in like the actual system, but if you were to hack the disk, it also contains, presumably for emulation testing purposes, Metroid Fusion. So basically, Daytel just straight up stole stuff from Nintendo and then made their own release. And all over it, they just said 100% unofficial GameCube release. What really is truly bizarre about this is that this disc is self-booting. And I'm not 100% sure how they achieved that, because the GameCube was pretty good at that, preventing that, but they were also managed to do that with the Action Replay. From what little I could tell, it looks like they had essentially lifted parts of discs from unused games and then kind of resurfaced them. I don't pretend to know how that's possible or how that makes any sense, but that's, from what I could tell, is just like they basically put some other game's loading files into this to effectively trick the system. At least that's my understanding of how they did it, but that's not much of an understanding, to be fair. But yeah, this is the release, and you might look at it and be like, okay, so what's with the red case? Somebody just replaced that? No. What they ended up doing is this: if you open it up, it doesn't have a manual. It has a single one sheet of paper, series of instructions, and then you can see the disc is obviously a GameCube disc, but it doesn't fit in the full-size lid. And it says Daytel, so this is the actual released plastic case that they put in there. And I looked at it and I'm like, that's such a bizarre choice, and then it instantly dawned on me why they use this. They also made a bunch of PS2 cheat code discs. That is the same size, of course, as a standard disc, which is what a PS2 disc would fit in. But this is a memory card slot, and surprise, surprise, not really surprise, PS2 memory cards fit perfectly in this. So basically, they just repurposed a bunch of PS2 cases that they themselves made, and then made a very pirated, junky GameCube release that's very unofficial. But it does exist, and it does self-boot. It's not even independent software exactly. So I just wanted to make people aware of this, because if you're into the GameCube, this is certainly an odd release, but it does exist. And I would bet you this is the only GameCube game, if you want to call it a game even, that does not work on the Wii. Because whatever reason, when Nintendo built the Wii and they put the GameCube support into it, one of the things they were able to successfully block was Action Replay. Since this is made by the same people, I'm betting this game won't work on there. But it does work on an actual GameCube. I don't know, but they managed to pull it off, so there it is. And I was happy to get it, even though, I mean, it's a piece of junk, but it's more the story about it. And when you want a full cube set, or at least full enough, technically that's on the list, but I could see why people would be like, yeah, I'm good with skipping that one. But regardless, it exists. Now, the rest of all this stuff actually comes from a store in Cardiff, Wales, called Super Tomato. Now, I did a video on this store. You can go back and watch that if you want, very recently. And these are all the pickups I got from it. So the first thing I got, well, at least for our purposes here, is Back to the Future Part 3 for the Sega Master System. I don't often pick up Sega Master System games, mostly because the system was a flop in North America and you don't find content for it very often. However, it was a juggernaut of success in Europe, and so they're much easier. There's way more games. They're usually a lot better, and they're easier to find. I'm a huge Back to the Future fan. I know this game itself is terrible. I fully understand that. But all the same, I was like, Back to the Future. I'm going to support it. Why not? So I managed to get that. And then I got a few games for a very odd system. There was a system created by a company called Amstrad, which was only released in the United Kingdom. I actually did videos on it years ago. It's called the Amstrad GX 4000. To this day, it is the last video game console created in the UK. Very few consoles since then have been made by countries other than Japan or the United States. There's a couple of random ones, like the CDI was like the last one out of Europe. I believe it was done out of the Netherlands, Philips specifically. There's a couple of just odd ones, like I think the Game Wave came from Canada, but there's a couple of oddballs. But for the most part, every single system since then has either been from the US or Japan. So oddly enough, to my British friends out there, this is the last video game console you guys made, I guess. And it was not a success. It was designed to compete with the NES and Master System, funny enough. And I think in the end, it only had like 20 or 25 games, something like that. I've had the system for years, and I've only ever had 3 games for it, which honestly is pretty significant given how small the library is and how hard the games are to find. But Tom, who runs Super Tomato, to his credit, he's like, yeah, I got a couple. I didn't even hesitate, just picked them up. The first one I got was Barbarian 2, The Dungeon of Drax. Now, when I first saw this, I kind of misfired in my brain, and I read it as Deathstalker 2, which, if anybody watches like Red Letter Media or knows their bad B movies, there's a series of movies called Deathstalker, and that's all I'm going to say on that. For a split second, I was like, wait a minute, they made a game of that? That's got to be insane. But no, Barbarian 2 has nothing to do with that. So, all the same, very cool to get that. I'm assuming the game itself isn't particularly good. It looks kind of like a Golden Axe ripoff, but it says, join the Ultimate Warrior and his Princess Mariana on their most perilous mission. Defeat the evil Drax in his heavily fortified lair. That's all it says. Moving on, we also got a game called Operation Thunderbolt, which kind of looks like it's going for a Contra vibe, except when you look at the back imagery, it seems to all be kind of first-person shooters, so that can't be right. Combat action with 2 thrills. Test your skills against swooping jets, helicopters, and tanks, and watch out for the air-to-ground missiles. That's all they have to say on it. I'm going to bet you that neither of these games are particularly good, but I don't really care. I just wanted Amstrad GX 4000 games because you just don't ever find them. It's like totally impossible. So now I have 5. Both of these were made by Ocean. Ocean was pretty much the only significant developer to make games for that system. In fact, of the 5 games I own, I think 4 of them were made by Ocean. I own this tennis game that wasn't, but then I have Burnin' Rubber and Batman, both of which were also made by them. So yeah, very cool. And then I got a whole big stack of Commodore Amiga CD32 games. The Amiga CD32 is a very bizarre system. I've done videos on this as well. If you're not familiar, basically there was a company called Commodore. In fact, I think they're still technically around, but I think they've been absorbed by somebody else, but whatever. Commodore is actually an American company. Funny enough, just like I said, most video game consoles are either American or Japanese. Now, Commodore was very significant in Europe, especially the UK, for their computer lines. However, they had one time decided to go ahead and make a home console. We know it as the Amiga CD32. However, due to certain legal issues they were suffering in the United States, they actually were not authorized to release the system in this country. But they were allowed to release it in other countries. And so where it had the most success was the UK, as well as various parts of Scandinavia. I think it technically got a mainland European release, but I've never really seen content for it there. And the one that's kind of the chase figure of all of them is it got a Canadian release. Although it's a pitiful amount. I've only seen the Canadian version like once ever. The system was region free, but the Canadian version is nice because it uses NTSC instead of PAL, and it also uses North American Power Supply instead of trust me when I say the system has a big, bulky power supply if you have the European version. I have a UK model specifically. But anyway, finding games for it is kind of a pain since it never came out in this country, and even in Canada where it did come out, I think I've seen games for it like once ever. But in the UK, I'm not going to say they're common, but they're at least somewhat findable. And the other strange part is, even though the system itself wasn't particularly successful, it had a ton of games released for it. And the simple reason for that is it basically was just one of their Commodore Amiga computers, and they just kind of slightly changed it. So bringing a game over from the computer to the console was like done. It took like no effort. So they were able to port tons and tons of stuff to it. So this is what I managed to pick up. 9 new Amiga CD32 games. We've got Arabian Nights, James Pond 2 Robocod, Super Skid Marks, which is a racing game I actually have for the Sega Mega Drive. I also got it. This was also released on the Mega Drive. It's not the Genesis, the Mega Drive specifically. Simon the Sorcerer, Assassins Ultimate Games Volume 2. And then we also see, you'll notice those were all in jewel cases, but they also did like big box PC style cases too. There wasn't any sense of uniformity to the Amiga CD32. Like some of these, like this doesn't even say it's for the Amiga CD32 except for like a vague reference within the description on the back. It's a very bizarre system, not well organized. But big box ones, we got Humans, famous game franchise Worms. Yes, there was a Amiga C32 version of this. PGA European Tour, so there was even your sports games. Funny enough, EA made a game for the Amiga C32, like who knew? And then finally, Roadkill, which I haven't played any of these yet, but I've heard this one's actually pretty good as far as like racing games go. So yeah, I'm very happy with that particular line of pickups. I don't know why I like collecting for the Amiga C32 so much. I think it's just because to me it's like this really weird chase figure. Like almost any time I find CD32 stuff, I can almost be guaranteed I don't have it. And I'm one of the few people to like actually have the system, be like, hey, I could get that. That would be cool. Same with GX4000, but that's because to me they're oddities, as opposed to like this, which is an oddity but is also junk, so whatever. But yeah, so that will do it for this particular video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Huge shout out to Tom, because not only does he run an awesome store, he gave me a very, very nice discount on this stockpile of items, so huge shout out to him. But yes, of course, I paid the dude money. He just gave me a nice haircut, which I appreciated. And of course, finding these other random games was awesome, as well as a huge shout out to Senko Games for sending me the Cube ODE. Thank you very much to Rocker Gaming for the Ninten-Drawer, as well as to MoveSpeed for the portable SSD. Again, I'll put links in the description to those guys. So appreciate you guys watching as always. If you could do me a favor, please like the video, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't done that before, and check out all my social media stuff in the description. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Discord, Patreon, Spreadshirt, Travel Channel. I appreciate the support so much. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all later.